So the channel trailer character work is complete. So what we're working on here is the title sequence. So that amounts to this kind of star thing that appears and has this sort of aqua glow around it. So that was pretty straightforward. And then what I did was I sort of animated the points of that star, and then here you see I blurred it so that I could then use the alpha channel to make those points sharper. And ultimately it wound up being several layers to really kind of make it look right. One of the mistakes I made was that that star actually is not centered correctly. So later you'll see I had to add a transform mask in Krita to just take the whole kit and caboodle and get it centered properly. So step one is just to animate the star. Now initially I used animated keyframes to make the star both grow and then shrink again. But when I looked at the Futurama intro on the real show, I realized that what they actually did was they had several animated keyframes as the star grows, but then when it shrinks again, it's just a CGI operation, really. They simply, that was me right there, just playing around with blend modes to make sure things were behaving the way I expected. So there I used the transform mask to center it. Once the star animates, then you get this beam that grows out of the center, and the star just shrinks away. It basically just disappears. So once I got that, I had to figure out a way to expand the beam out like on an angle so it opens up and reveals the sort of curtain-like effect. And so I figured ultimately once I get that right, that's going to serve as a mask for the curtain, and we'll get to that here shortly where we see how the curtain effect was created. So here what I did was I basically added a dummy layer in order to make sure things were centered properly, and then to serve, as you'll see here in a moment, as a guide for how to open up that beam over time. And I just did the right side of it, and I figured, okay, once we get that correct, we can duplicate the layer and flip it, and then you'll get the other side. So these are all the guidelines for it, so that I can just go in and paint the beams, you know, down, 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 down. So I basically got all the guides in there, and then I did the turquoise and then went over it with the white, like as you can see there, and then offset the white a little bit so that it happens just a bit later, which causes the aqua to sort of lead the way, and the white trails behind it. And then as you can see, we also duplicated the layer, and then you get that effect. So now we've not only got the opening up thing, but we've also got that opening up that can serve as a mask for the curtain. So how are we going to do the curtain? I don't know how they did it, but the way I did it was, and you'll see here shortly, I was just like tightening up the edge on that that envelope as it opens. So that looks pretty good. Now what about the curtain? So the way I did the curtain was you just go like this. I just added these various levels of brightness, and then over time just added animated keyframes so that it kind of evolves a bit. That was the easy part. Getting that to sort of move and swirl around the way I wanted looked good. But now what I need to do is I need to take that and I need to project it on a sphere. I tried to use Krita's tools, but it was pretty much hopeless. So here you'll see in a moment I open up Blender, and what I did was I took the curtain thing and projected it onto a sphere, and then I had to play around with the projection mapping so that it mapped correctly. And you'll see here it didn't take too long to figure out how to adjust that so that it looked like what you see right there. So it's sort of coming out from a point, and then by moving the center or the ball around, into the right position, you would get the effect that you see on Futurama, just like that. So then it was a matter of just rendering that out, and then here shortly after it's done rendering, unfortunately the rendering kind of took a long time, longer than one might hope. But once I got that pretty much right, I also added a general animation of it so that the texture actually curls around over time. And, you know, basically looks about right. And so then the next step, of course, is to bring that back into Krita and then use the white that's folding out in both directions and use that as a mask to reveal the curtain effect. And so what I was doing there is just getting the masking right while Blender was rendering it. And I figured, okay, then I'll just bring in the correct texture. And when I'm ready to do that, all of the masking and everything will already be done. So it's probably getting to be about the time here where I pulled in the correct one. So instead of looking at the flat curtain, there we go. So now we've got the correct effect. And then I had to sort of find the sweet spot to size it correctly, add a little bit of a glow at the base of it, because at the base of that effect, there's it's just brighter. It's just like a little bit of a whitening that takes place. There were some times where Krita was acting a little bit silly. And then ultimately what I did was I took that effect and doubled it over itself and moved half of the keyframes over in order to essentially create a seamless loop, so that the way it would look would be you just get this interaction in the curtain. It didn't just look like it was rolling from one side to the other. It actually was more of a just kind of a cool interaction of those two layers. So we're almost done here. So once we get to the end here, I'll play the actual loop that we wound up with, and you'll see how it looked when it was all done. Okay, so the next step, of course, will be to add the spaceship and the logo, which instead of saying Futurama, it will say Fan Futurama. So if you have any questions about anything about how that was done or whatever, just post it in the comments. And as you know, there will be more later.